God wants to know what you're eating today. What are you eating today? In the moment of your life, in this week, what are you eating? Or who are you eating from? I was reading Genesis today, and I noticed how God said to Adam, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" That's Genesis chapter 3, verse 11. Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree? And in this little verse, in this little sentence, this little question from God, the very first question that he gives to Adam when he meets Adam, of course he calls out for Adam and he says, "Where are you? Where are you?" And Adam replies that he was afraid. And after that interaction, God's first question to him, after finding him, is, "Who told you you were naked? Who told you?" And so I believe there is a correlation here between our perspective and what we've eaten. Because Adam's perspective of being naked and vulnerable came from eating. Not just physically, but of course this was physically. What are you eating in life? And how do those things change your perspectives? How do they change your perspective? You know, all throughout the Bible, we can see stories of people who had different perspectives. Even I'm thinking about the giants in the promised land. I'm thinking about the spies. Perspective. What did you eat to have the perspective that you do? Are you eating off of God? Are you eating God? Are you eating His presence? Because the perspective that comes from eating God's presence is faith. It's belief. It's believing that God can do the miraculous, the impossible. It's believing that giants are not issues, but grasshoppers. It changes your perspective of not being the grasshopper, but actually seeing them as the grasshopper, because your perspective changes from you to God. When we look at anything for our own eyes, it looks big, too big. When we look through God's eyes, it's too small. You know, those giants are never a problem. Not for God. Goliath wasn't a problem for God. And yet everyone in that army looked and seen this giant and they were afraid. But David said no. Who's this uncircumcised Philistine? He comes against God? No. No. You see, David looked through God's eyes. He wasn't looking through the eyes of man that everyone else that day was looking at and had been looking through. So again, that question, what have you been eating? Who have you been eating from? Because what you've been eating and who you've been eating it from is going to change your perspective. Lesser perspective, higher perspective. I mean, if you're going through life, would you rather have the perspective of an ant or the perspective of an eagle? You know, bird's eye view. Or do you want to have such a small, limited view? Tiny, 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 where everything else is so far bigger. Or will you have an eagle's bird's eye view? Where you realize that everything is so small and so insignificant. Because God is just bigger than it. So there's a challenge for you. What are you eating and who are you eating from? God bless.